George Soros was born under the name of Georgi Schwartz on the 12th of August 1930 in Budapest, which back then was part of the Kingdom of Hungary. And yes, that was a long time ago. Soros' mother's family owned a successful cloth store while his father was a lawyer. His family changed the name from the German Jewish name of Schwartz to Soros, which was a way to avoid attention during times in which Hungary was not welcoming to Jews. Today, George Soros is a hedge fund manager and investor who has now become a very significant philanthropist and a man who has authored or co-authored several books. A few of his titles include The Alchemy of Finance, published in 1988, Opening the Soviet System from 1996, and Open Society, Reforming Global Capitalism in 2001. Soros has also published numerous articles in the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and the Atlantic on themes that vary from finance as well as Russia and Israeli geopolitics. But let's get back to our story. After the Second World War and the hardships of that war, Soros moved to London to study at the prestigious London School of Economics. And there was a student of Karl Popper, a famous philosopher of the time. He continued to study and completed his doctorate in philosophy, commonly known as a PhD, from the University of London. And once he finished his studies, he reached out to many of the merchant banks in London and finally received an offer to join Singer and Friedlander in London in '54, where he eventually landed in the arbitrage department. Now, arbitrage was the hot thing in finance back in that day, and if you've watched our video on another hedge fund titan, Steve Cohen, you'll remember that Steve also started in the arbitrage department of a New York firm. Soros then moved to New York to be arbitrage trader for FM Mayer, with a focus on stocks of European companies. And that was in a moment where Europe was moving to increasing unity within their common market, first through the coal and steel community and then with the common market, which led to significant growth within the continent. Soros moved to a couple of other jobs and developed his investing theory, which posits that trading of market securities is often a result of human fallacies and not just economic fundamentals and valuations. So, a few years later, he set up his Double Eagle hedge fund with $4 million in capital and based it in beautiful Curaçao, part of the Dutch Antilles. Now, this fund was successful, and later this allowed him to start the Soros Fund Management in 1970, and that was with his colleague Jim Rogers and legendary investor Stanley Druckenmiller. His fund was hugely successful and grew to $400 million by 1981. There were some good times and some bad times, but in 2011, Soros retuned all of his outside money and continued to invest his whopping $25 billion of family fortune. Clearly, Soros has been very successful and has made himself and his investors a ton of money. But one of his top trades that made him somewhat of an investing legend was his short position on the British pound. Now, he'd noticed an arbitrage given the unfavourable position of the UK in the exchange rate mechanism of Europe, the ERM, and he set his trades up to profit from this situation. It was Black Wednesday on the 16th of September 1992 that Soros shorted over $10 billion and made a windfall estimated at over $1 billion in that one single trade. He immediately reached financial stardom and was described as the man who broke the Bank of England. Now, there are a number of other instances where he's claimed to be targeting some other countries' economies, whether rightly or wrongly. But what happened on that Black Wednesday will be hard to repeat and, of course, will never be forgotten. The whole idea of these types of trades is deeply rooted in psychology, and it runs counter to the belief that markets will correct themselves after a shock. By studying the market crash of 1930, Soros understood that there can be embedded optimistic or pessimistic biases in markets that can then lead to booms, busts and bubbles in markets over time. And he had the wits and the cash to play those trades very effectively. A few of the initial investors that he teamed up with became legendary in their own right. For example, Stanley Druckenmiller and Jim Rogers, and they're two huge names in the investing world. And they started off with George Soros, but went on to do very well on their own. And I guess we could make a couple of videos on those two, but I would encourage you to like this video and let us know in the comments below if you'd like to get more videos on Stanley and Jim, or anyone else for that matter. So as a result of all these activities, including books and investing, Soros is a billionaire, and he's worth around $8.3 billion, and that excludes over $30 billion that he's donated to the Open Society Foundations. That's a large charity and grant-making organisation that supports civil society groups around the world, and whose name derives from Karl Popper's book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, which, if memory serves me, was published around 1945. And although originally Hungarian, he's now also an American citizen. He's been married 3 times to Anneliese Witschak for about 20 years, then Susan Weber, whom he divorced in 2005, and then Tomiko Bolton in 2013, and still married to Tomiko. He's got 5 children, and each one has followed somewhat in his footsteps, but also moved into completely different areas, including working on philanthropic projects and working in the field of arts, like Gregory James Soros. His son Alexander was also prominently displayed in high society magazines in the company of gorgeous models and sports stars. I guess he's one pretty popular young lad. During the course of his career, Soros has received many honours, including honorary doctoral degrees from the New School for Social Research in New York and the University of Oxford in 1980, the Corvinus University of Budapest and Yale University in 1991, and he's received an honorary degree in economics from the University of Bologna in Italy in 1995. He was the Financial Times Person of the Year for 2018, and the year before that became an honorary fellow of the British Academy. About a decade before that, he was included in the Institutional Investors Alpha Hedge Fund Manager Hall of Fame with Steve Cohen, and that's whom we've already created a video about, and do check that one out. And a number of other legends we'll be talking about here, like Ken Griffin, David Swenson, Paul Tudor-Jones and many others. Like Steve Cohen, Soros has an interest in sports and was part of a group of investors who tried to buy the Washington Nationals that play in Major League Baseball, and was rumoured to potentially being interested in buying AS Roma, the Italian soccer team, and that was eventually acquired by another US investor. And in 2012, he took a stake in the English soccer club Manchester United, after the club was publicly listed. But in addition to all his success and his honours, Soros has had some dark moments. And maybe the biggest of them all was when someone placed a pipe bomb in the mailbox of his home in late 2018. The suspect behind a series of these pipe bombs, including the one sent to George Soros, was arrested a few days later. And none of the bombs that the suspect sent exploded, fortunately, so nobody got injured. But another tricky episode was when Soros was involved in the Société Générale insider trading case. And there he was offered to participate in the French privatisation launched by French President Chirac, who was offering shares in previously public French companies. Soros decided to invest on his own outside the government programme, and the French stock exchange regulator went after him and convicted him for those trades and fined him about €1 million as a penalty. But interestingly, he appealed the French Supreme Court conviction to the European Court of Human Rights, which is a lesser-known court outside of the European Union system. And that court can overrule national supreme courts of its member countries. The European Court concluded against reversing the French court, and with 4 judges to 3 decision, the court rejected Soros's appeal. And that's it for now, folks. But one thing I really want to ask you is please do like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel. And do please give us your comments below. And tell us what other videos you'd like to see, and let us hear your thoughts. Thanks a lot in advance, and we'll see all of you very soon.